Hello everybody, my name is Zenith. I'm going to be discussing this video by a guy called End of Atheism. Very ambitious title. Why am I doing this? Well, I personally like to express my brain muscles, but also just to okay, so I would start this off by saying this. I have no problem with Christianity. I personally believe that everybody has the power inside them to do amazing things. I understand some people need more motivation, need something to inspire them. And Christianity can achieve that. However, sometimes some Christians can be dickheads. Like this guy. True, some atheists can be dickheads, and I'll talk about that in a different video. But I'm just here to point out how this guy's been kind of a dickhead. Yeah. Although I don't know about anything about fucking video editing, I'm just going to be playing this video, listening to the audio, and stopping the video and talking about it. Let's go!
Does human suffering mean that religion is a lie? Is the existence of pain proof that God doesn't exist?
A quick disclaimer, I've watched this video before and prepared my arguments because I don't want to fuck up during recording.
Find out in this two-part End of Atheism series on the question of suffering.
A little funny thing. I'm actually curious what he'll do in the next video, because he seems to have done everything in this video from previous watched. By everything, he means giving me plenty of material to fuck him over with.
We live in a world of enormous beauty, and for some, this is enough to believe in a God who created it.
Okay, I get where he's coming from with that point. I just personally see this beauty as I don't know what I see it as, really. I mean, it's random by chance. I just see it as beautiful. I don't see that the fact that it has beauty to be some reason for there to be a creator.
But others ask that if God really does exist, then good God, why does he let us suffer? After all, what did an innocent child do to become seriously ill? Why do so many people still die of hunger? Where is God in all this? Religion replies, saying that whilst it may be a tough pill to swallow, this life was never meant to be one where we don't face any hardship. Rather, it teaches that the hardship we do face is necessary for us to achieve the purpose of our lives.
Okay, he makes a big problem with this video. The big problem is he classifies all suffering as equal. You see, he states that, he goes on to essentially his basic point is that we need suffering to grow. The way I see it, suffering is only good if we can overcome it. Like, I have suffered in my life, but I've overcome that suffering and thus have progressed and become stronger. But some suffering you can't get over. Say you have a good Samaritan, a guy that's guy or girl, that's perfect, just kind and great and everything, and they die painfully of cancer. They did not overcome that suffering or that pain. That pain is gonna fuck them in the ass, and they can't do anything about it. Or say someone gets raped and they're traumatized for life. Suffering is only useful, and it only has a point when we can overcome it. But some suffering we can't just overcome. And he never addresses this and kind of undermines his own video, but let's keep going.
That is, to progress in the knowledge and love of our Creator, and to constantly be improving our moral character.
I understand what he means, but I do agree with religion by saying we need suffering to create purpose in our life to improve our moral character. Love of God, I don't think we need to really love God. I don't think we need to kiss his fucking ass. Because if he was all good, he wouldn't be arrogant, unless he wouldn't need us constantly kiss his fucking ass all day long.
In order to make progress in these two ideals, we need two things. 1. The free will to make our choices meaningful, and 2. Tests to prove our worth.
I see what he means there. He makes some good points. Those are some actually good points. It's just, you'll see.
So now, let's think about suffering. When you look at suffering in all of its diverse types, it turns out that all suffering is actually a byproduct of these two essential elements we need to make life So free will accounts for the vast majority of suffering in the world. Just take a look at all the wars in human history. Whilst many ask, why didn't God stop them? The real question is, why didn't man stop them?
Okay, here's my explanation to this. Oh, my rebuttal. Man didn't stop them, humans did not stop them, because we're rational, stupid motherfuckers, and because some people just didn't want to. And here's the problem he makes. He assumes that everyone... he's talking to the wrong people. People who start wars and who mindlessly hurt innocent people, they can go fuck themselves. Quite frankly, can go fuck themselves. But the innocent civilians get caught in the way of that. The innocent people who are forced to suffer because some megalomaniac wanted that specific piece of land so bad he was willing to murder millions for it. That's where we have that is where most atheists, well, I can't speak for most atheists, but that's where me as an atheist has a problem with. Why does God let this one jackass fuck over everybody? Why does he not stop? Or, like, if someone does not want to, has nothing to do with a war, if an innocent peasant, sorry, an innocent person has nothing to do or has no interest in starting a war, why should they suffer from the consequences of that war?
Then take a look at world hunger or poverty. We all know that there is more than enough food in the world, and yet many still starve. There is more than enough money in the world, and yet we ourselves create inequalities and poverty.
It's bunching them all together. Humans are not, of course, not all the same. Some people are rich jackasses, some people are rich nice people. Some people are poor jackasses, some people are poor nice people. And it's like, the problem is here, is that human race as a whole, as a collective group of consciousness, I say, does not have complete control over the wealth. Select individuals have control over money and food. And these people sometimes can be greedy assholes, or can just be morons, like with Putin destroying tons and tons of food just because it's from a foreign country. As Smith misses the point, he doesn't understand that we don't have a problem with that, although humans do cause free will, and though humans are responsible for these problems, not every single human causes these problems. A select few cause these problems, and a bunch of other people are forced to fucking pay for it. And this is where we have our problem. Atheists ask, how come the innocent have to suffer because of the actions of jackasses?
The sad reality is that many people abuse the blessing of free will. Instead of helping people with it, they hurt them.
Right on that, sadly.
It's obvious then that to remove the suffering caused by free will, you'd have to remove free will. But imagine life without it. Without the choice to choose between doing something good or doing something bad, our actions would be neither good nor bad.
We're not saying or at least I'm not saying, get rid of all free will. Okay, so the government does stop people from doing certain things. You can't do certain drugs, you can't hurt people, you can't harass people, you can't steal from them. But say you have person A, say adult A, adult B. Adult A tells adult B they're a cocksucking motherfucker. Are the police called in to stop that person? No. Let's say a new adult B cheats on a new adult A cheats on a new adult B. It's completely different people now. With adult C. Adult B feels like shit, of course. But do the police step in? No, because not all free will should be stopped. Not all amount of suffering should be halted. Just when it's pointless and when it's not helping anybody, that is when it should be stopped.
We would just be puppets on a string, going through whatever motions someone else set out for us.
Again, not saying control all free will. Sorry, not saying control all free will and just stop all suffering. What I'm saying is that not all suffering is needed. Sorry about the camera shaking. This is just all on a pile of books since I don't have a camcorder again at eye level. I have the best words.
Free will, then, is definitely worth keeping. And if we want to get rid of the suffering caused by it, then the real solution is to start using it properly.
Okay. Besides the whole stupid point that getting rid of pointless suffering does not equal getting rid of free will. I like what he's saying here. We should all start using our free will to start bettering the world. Here's the thing. Humans are weak. Well, sometimes humans can be amazing people, but they can be also weak people. Not to mention, humans can't always cause miracles. And so, a collective group of people, a collective huge group of people, can band together and create something great. But in between here, say people forming to do something great, and here, this great thing happening, people will continue to be fucked over. And this is where my argument comes in. Why doesn't God shorten the space? If God does care about the lives of the innocent, why does he not shorten the space between people wanting to change and people getting the change?
Now let's look
Sorry.
at the suffering caused by things outside of our free will, like natural disasters, or congenital disease, or unavoidable illness.
Oh God.
For another words, why do bad things happen to good people? But the thing is that religion doesn't teach us that the suffering in our life depends on how good we are as people. Rather, it teaches that how good we are as people depends on how we deal with the suffering in our lives.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point, religion. That's actually a very good quote. Problem is, again, he's grouping all suffering together. Say you get bullied. Like, I've been bullied personally. And I've overcome that. I've worked through it, and I've become a stronger person for it. Say you get cancer and you die painfully, as I mentioned before. You can't overcome dying painfully from cancer. And thus there's nothing to gain from it. There's nothing to learn from it. There's nothing to improve on. And when you have something suffering that you can't improve on, then it becomes pointless, and you have to ask, why does God let this shit happen?
For example, when things don't go our way, do we become bitter, angry, and resentful? Or do we remain patient and show compassion even when we're hurting? When we see the suffering of others, do we ignore it and walk away? Or do we have the strength to face it and do whatever we can to help them?
Again, this only works for a specific type of suffering. True, by suffering yourself, you can understand how others feel when they suffer, but that doesn't really help if you can't overcome the suffering or if you die from that suffering. I've said suffering a lot, haven't I? So yeah, this point is right. Like, through suffering we can learn to be more kind and stuff. But again, you can't always come all types of suffering.
The fact is that without trials, morality would be all theory and no practice. We would never know where we actually stand. There would be no successes to be encouraged by, no mistakes to learn from. We would just be stuck at one level, with no hope of progress. As the Sufi poet Rumi said, if you are annoyed by every rub, how will your mirror ever be polished?
It's actually really sad, because this guy does make some good points. He's very philosophical, but his entire argument is just taken out from under him, just kicked fucking out from under him. When you take into account that all suffering is equal, and not all suffering can be overcome. Because if we go back, yes, it says there's no successes to admire. There is no failures to learn from. You can't always learn from your failures.
All suffering, whether it's from other people's actions or from natural phenomena, involves a loss in one form or the other, be it a loss of health, of wealth, or of a loved one. But these losses ultimately serve to remind us that this world and everything in it is transient. If we attach our hearts to it, it will eventually betray us.
Great advice there. Don't attach your heart to anything, kids. You get fucked over.
So when we lose something we loved in this world, it reminds us that if we want true and lasting contentment, we must attach our hearts to one who is eternal, one who will never suffer any loss, and who will never disappoint.
Except God, like the whole point of atheism is that this all-powerful being has disappointed. God disappointed me, and not getting off his lazy ass and stopping pointless suffering. This guy makes some good points, but still, it's just,
So we see that whatever suffering there is, it stems from free will and trying situations, both of which we need to be who we want to be. But that's not all. Religion teaches that there is a life after death, where everyone's suffering and personal circumstances are taken into account and compensated beyond our wildest dreams. According to atheism, however, suffering, like happiness, is entirely meaningless.
Suffering like happiness. Interesting words. Also, stop grouping things together. I'm an atheist, and I personally fully believe that suffering has a point to it. Not all atheists believe that suffering, like, if you believe that suffering has no point to it, and it's just freaking whatever, that's called being a narcissist. That's not the same as being an atheist. It
is simply the accidental byproduct of an accidental universe.
No, it isn't. Okay, so the point is trying to make... Wait, I'll see if he finishes this to make my argument.
So we see that far from being an argument against religion, religion is the only philosophy that helps to make sense of suffering.
Bull fucking shit. Okay, so he did end that point, so I'm gonna make my rebuttal here. Actually, first watched this video, I found it kind of hard to rebuttal that point, where he made saying that when we suffer and die, we go to heaven, and all our suffering is compensated for, because we get tons of shit. So actually, if you believe in heaven, and then that's actually a pretty good hard point to rebuttal, until I realized you can rebuttal it. Because let me ask you this. Say, start of the year, some wanker punches you square in the fucking nose, breaks your nose, fucks you up, but for the rest of the year, no one hurts you. Everyone's actually really nice to you. Does that change the fact that some plonker punched you in the fucking nose and made you look like a deformed rugby player? Those of you that don't know, rugby is kind of like, if you're American out there, rugby is kind of like the origins of football, essentially. Look it up. So here's where the problem comes in. It's a sort of cycle that doesn't quite work. Someone gets suffering, but they go to heaven, that suffering is compensated for by getting happiness. But that does not change the fact that someone has suffered, and the suffering will carry on for the rest of their life. That's how PTSD works. Suffering that is ingrained into your mind so much that you can never escape it. And thus, you are still going to suffer in heaven. But if God is going to take away that suffering and try and make you happy for it, then why didn't he take that suffering away in the first place? See the cycle here? Person gets suffering. Person is compensated, and thus they suffer. Person is compensated for that suffering in heaven, but they are still suffering from the original suffering. See, suffering A occurs, they're hurt. Compensated for suffering A, still hurt. God, he was assumed that God should then get rid of that suffering, of suffering A. But then why didn't he get rid of suffering A in the first place? And thus you see the cycle goes on and everything turns to bullshit. Just because you're compensated, just because you're given a reward for going through hardships does not change the fact that you've been through hardships and sometimes you just feel like shit. And if you're going to try and fix it by taking away that hardship, then what's the point of not taking it away earlier, prior to someone having to go through all of it? That's it.
Either there is no God, and suffering is as arbitrary as our whole existence.
God damn it, again. Atheists do not believe that.
Or there is a God, and our short-lived suffering is actually a blessing in disguise.
Again, that isn't a definitive... Well, maybe it is a definitive Christian thing, but it's definitely not a definitive atheist thing to believe that suffering is pointless. That's just ridiculous.
Religion, then, teaches that suffering is not meaningless.
Yes, but so does a lot of things.
But meaningful. And there is surely some solace in that.
He then goes on to talk about Instagram, Twitter, all that shit. Okay, now if you still want some convincing, this YouTuber I watch, Darkman2525. Watch him, by the way. He's fucking hilarious. He makes some really great points. He made the point of arguing that God favors the sinners. Now, a big argument I hear... Now, he put a scenario up. Say you have a mother and a child walking down the street. Two guys run up to them. One guy starts raping the mother. The other guy starts murdering the child. Christians could argue that God should not change this because he would be hurting the free will of the murderers. Which alone sounds pretty controversial. But let me ask you this. Does the mother want to be raped? No. Does the child want to be murdered? No. And thus their free will is being affected when the murderer is murdering the child, the rapist is raping the mother. And so no matter what God does, this character's shaking, it's really annoying me. I'll hold it in place. And so it doesn't come down to affecting free will or not affecting free will, because someone's free will is always going to be affected. You have to ask yourself, whose free will is more important? The murderer and the rapist, or the mother and the child? And if you argue they go to heaven and they're compensated for it, will that unrape the mother or unmurder the child? And if you ask, but you can say, well, you also say that, well, the murderer and rapist will be suffering for all eternity, in incredible pain, and so something for a mortal sin will give an eternal punishment. Which the only time, like in history, mythology, the only time eternal sin was given to people were really, well, actually, they were given to mortals, but we have to admit, punishing someone for something they did in a mortal life with an eternal punishment is kind of fucked up. And so that's what happens if God doesn't intervene. If he does intervene, a mother is not raped, a child is not murdered, and two men can progress and understand what they did is wrong, and they can become good members of society. This is all said by, again, Darkmatter2525. I'll put the link to this video and link to the video I'm talking about in the thingy. So my final statement is this. Suffering and pointless suffering are two very different things. Suffering is only useful when we can overcome it, but some suffering we cannot overcome. Rape, like I said, mind-crippling rape, or just rape in general, and dying painfully of disease. And this is what this guy misses. Not all suffering is equal, and we can't always learn from our suffering. He also misses the fact that, as I mentioned before, just because you go to heaven and your suffering is compensated for, not change the fact you got fucked over. And not to mention, it keeps trying to group in Gnosticism with atheism, which is kind of insulting. But, if you go back to, I know you can't see this, but if you go back to his channel, End of Atheism, I love that title, you'll see that he has a video called Is Islam a Religion of Terror? Sponsored to Donald Trump and all Islamophobes. I agree with him. Islam is not a religion of terror. That's a topic for another video. And it annoys me, so this guy does have some thought behind it. And that's the thing. Christians like this, they do have to put some thought in. And I appreciate for that. They do try to make it philosophical and actually try to make it intelligent. But the problem is they oversimplify things and miss huge chunks of the equation. Like so often I see Christians trying to point out, evolution does not exist because it's all up to chance. Chance is an explanation. Chance is not the only reason that evolution is real. There's also the fact that chance creates certain aspects of someone, and thus the environment decides which ones will survive. They're missing an entire portion of evolution. Again, most definitely a topic for another video. But yeah, this is my opinion on it. I apologize for the shitty lighting. It's literally just my window. And I'm sorry I fucked up my speaking. Again, this is just off the fly. Have a good one.